it's not a cure-all, and it's not just being hooked up to the internet does not solve any of your problems. I've been to a couple of schools that have recently opened, and what they've done is spent fabulous amounts of money on these great connected computers.
Great amounts of money on hardware.
Hardware. And no idea what to do with it. I'm like, well, you know, there are these programs that you can use, and you can be interactive in the classroom in these ways. Oh no, we're not going to put it in the classroom. So you've got all of these computers, you're going to throw them all in one room, where if you try to teach, these kids have internet access behind a screen, which means they're not going to be following anything that you're doing.
Right.
Unless you're extremely technically competent, which most people aren't.
Right. And I also think, one thing, a couple of years ago I saw some pre-publication software from a highly respected publisher, and this was going to be the internet course. And I looked at it and I realized it was essentially 1950s, 1960s methodology with all the bells and whistles that the internet could have. It was basically listen and repeat all the way through.
Fill in the blanks.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that can be done. You mentioned the screen. I teach one reading class on the net. And it's wonderful because we start out with everybody being on the same websites and teaching students. One problem I have, I think most of us have as teachers, when you send students out onto the net, they can get in over their heads so quickly, and you end up looking at pictures of butterflies in Africa or something because you can't understand it. So we start out in the same places, and then part of what I'm teaching is how to find websites that they can understand. But as a teacher, because I'm not particularly good technically, and talk about literally everybody not being on the same page. It's literal, websites.
Yes.
But learning how to do it is great, and that's wonderful.
That's one of the things that I'm trying to do now too, is teaching my students not to repeat or whatever else, but giving them skills as opposed to teaching them a language. These are the tools that I can give you.
Exactly.
Nobody can teach a language in 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
You can't teach someone in that kind of time. You can teach them how to teach themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also think, related to the web, one thing I find with students is so often, English is what I do in English class, but often outside, unless they're doing an English thing, they're going to Dave's ESL Cafe to do whatever, they come to First Hand Cafe to get a key pal, whatever. Then, okay, I'm doing English. But the rest of the time, it doesn't occur to them that there's so much related to other things they're studying in English that is accessible, that is comprehensible.
Right, and I think it's part of breaking down the simulacra of the English classroom. You've got a fake sort of environment that is English classroom English, which is what a lot of people, at a lot of places, we end up teaching. So you teach English classroom English, and then whenever they go out into the world, it just has no connection. That is the place where I do that. Whereas the kind of stuff that you're talking about, where you're starting at a website and then eventually bringing them out into the internet, is internet English, which is actually something that might be of use to them someday.
Might be of use, and might be of use in all their other classes.
Exactly.
Because there are great websites in Korean or in Japanese or in Chinese, but there's so much more in English. And so when they're I teach in an intercultural studies department, so by definition my students are doing international things. And whether they're studying Africa or India or wherever.
Right. If you're looking for information on Zambia, which is an English-speaking country, then you're not going to be able to find that, or very much of that information in Korean. Whereas those skills, actually being able to get there, find it, look through them, and judge the stuff they can and can't read.
Exactly. One thing, and this is really obvious, but I share it because I found a lot of teachers who hear it say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that." You don't go to Yahoo, you go to Yahooligans. You don't go to ask.com, to clear, yahoo.com. Is it Korean? Yahoo.co.
Yeah, that's Yodekar.
Yeah. You go to Yahoo, you're going to get
1,000
sites. You go to Yahooligans, which is the kids' site. And what happens is you get stuff that is comprehensible. And if we're talking nonfiction topics, if we're talking somebody wants to know about Zambia, if we're talking, they could run into stuff. A lot of it is aimed at, for example, junior high school age native speaker, American kids, which is comprehensible. And I'm not saying that's enough, but I am saying if a Korean college student, on average, goes to a site aimed at college students in America, it's going to be I+50. It's going to be just I+50. It's going to be such a high level of English that basically they give up. So Yahooligans is good. AJ Kids, which is the kids site of Ask Jeeves. And there's one out of Berkeley called Kids Click, which there are 2 or 3 URLs for it. I know you can get there by going to Google and Kids Click, one word.
We'll take all these links. They'll be right now. If you look right underneath the video, you'll see the links that we're talking about, and you can click them and go check them out. What?
Nothing.
We'll have that. Anyway, that's if I can plug an article that's coming out soon, sometime this summer, from Cambridge University Press. There's going to be a new book edited by Julian Bamford and Richard Day called, I think it's called Activities for Extensive Reading.
Right.
And in that, I did a chapter on extensive reading, which implies easy stuff on the internet. And that'll be out hopefully sometime this summer from Cambridge. So that will give you some techniques.
Excellent. To use that as a bridge, I think we'll go straight past the first part of what we're going to do, because I think that was far better than what I had planned. And let's go talking about what actually the internet has to offer as far as helping you inside the classroom goes. What we're using here is English Firsthand, which Marc co-wrote, it says on the textbook, with Stephen Brown and Thomas Mandeville. It's a textbook that a lot of people are using, and before this interview, I decided to go out and ask some teachers about teachers' manuals and the extra material, and for the most part, I got blank looks. And so what I'd like to do is, for all those blank looks out there, I'd like to give you guys, or have the author of the book give you guys a 5-minute sort of help session about how you can take 5 minutes out of your teaching day and use the material available to make your classrooms both more entertaining and an awful lot easier for you. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got the manual and the teacher's, the student book and the teacher's manual. I have one question first about the teacher's manual. Why don't I get the pretty pictures? Why are these teacher's manuals in black and white with no pictures? Do I not deserve pictures, Marc?
A moment ago, when I saw this, I said, wow, I've never seen this one. Because the one I have has pictures. The one I have is interleaved. Okay, it has a student book page here in color.
Right.
And this page also. I think what happened is basically, and as I said, I've never seen this before.
Right.
A few minutes ago. I think what happens is economics.
Sure.
We're here in Korea, which is a huge market, but they're trying to make this available to as many teachers for as low a price as possible.
Right.
And so they did a local edition that is not interleaved. I don't know if the interleaved version is available in Korea. I prefer interleaved versions because 2 things. You only have to carry 1 book into classroom.
Yes.
I also like the fact that you can fake it because guess what? A lot of teachers don't have time to plan as thoroughly as we want. And frankly, I think it would be a mistake to use it as an excuse, like I don't have time to plan, therefore I have to wing it. Plan if you can. But we all run into that time where, like, we thought we had planned for that class, or you know, a teacher's sick and your boss says you're covering for that and it starts now, or do you know the term 3-step planning?
No, I don't. 3-step
planning is you're about 3 steps from the door and like, what am I going to do? And you got to be able to whip open the teacher's book, and so when I write teacher's manuals, I write a teacher's script, and which you're right about the color. In the other teacher's manual, the teacher's script is in blue.
Okay.
So it stands out. But here it's in italics.
Okay.
So that you can walk in, and if you don't know, you know, if you haven't thought it through, you can walk in and say, okay, look at page 79. You're going to, etc.
Okay, let's do that right now, because this is exactly what I do. I got some stuff off the net for Unit 4. So we're going to play Marc Helgesen, Unit 4, I've got 5 minutes to prepare.
Okay.
Oh my, what am I going to do?
Okay, what I would do, first of all, is I start off with unit objectives, and I start off with every page with in brief.
Can we get a camera shot of that unit objective there?
Okay. Tells you what you're teaching, and in brief is the quick summary. One of the things that I think is important to remember is nobody reads a teacher's manual in a linear way. You don't read a teacher's manual the way you read a novel. So I tried to design it, a bunch of different components, okay? So there is a step-by-step lesson plan that and I said the teacher's script, it tells you how to say it, okay? And who's that for? People automatically think that's for non-native teachers. Maybe, maybe not. I think more often it's for people who are new to teaching who talk too much. Because it's really easy to just walk and say, okay guys, so today we're going to do a pair work, so can you divide yourself into pairs, and one of you is A and B, and one can pay A, and you're like, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
So they're written really short. We aimed for 7 words or less in the instruction sentences. You can't always do it in 7 words, but that was the aim. And imperative form. So basically, it does not say, okay, I would like you to open your books. It says, open your books to page.
So generally, you're modeling good teaching behavior then for teachers who are just starting out.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
if I'm an experienced teacher,
then you're probably going to skip the lesson plan, because you don't need me to give you a lesson plan.
Okay.
But there's always a section called options and variations.
Okay.
And there are also a bunch of extra warm-up activities, extra expansion activities.
Okay.
Okay. And one thing I should maybe mention, and some of the people who see this will probably have seen the webcast of the inner voice thing.
Right.
And I love inner voice, and it's very, very useful. But some teachers are going to say, what's that? Which means, basically, a lot of that is going to be a little too unusual to put in a student book. But you can put lots of interesting things in a teacher's manual, with the idea that the teacher who wants to experiment a little more can.
Right.
Okay, now I'm getting off the track. You asked, you've got 5 minutes.
Yep.
What should you do? What I would do first, and this is not for 5 minutes from now, this is for, you're teaching this book this term, I put all of my lesson plans on the web. And it's at efcafe.com.
And if you'll notice here, we actually have the Unit 4 lesson plans printed off from EF Cafe.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting that you use my lesson plans exactly, but I'm saying this is a tool. This is not a theoretical thing. This is what I do. And often it's easier to modify somebody else's plan than to write your own. So as EF Cafe, and then when you're there, check EF Series resources, and you'll see lesson plans. So I would, at the beginning of the term, print them out, so then you have some ideas. Okay? And then you go in, you know basically what you want to, you probably know the pages you want to cover.
Right.
Okay? I would look at that page in the manual. I very often, and this is just my preference, I usually like to start off with a warm-up activity that is not from the student book.
Right.
And it's obviously not a case of me not liking student books. I want to start off with the students communicating with each
Right.
other. So I would find whatever there is in the manual. So here's one called Flash Picture. You need a large picture or an OHP transparency of a classroom. Okay, so if I can get that, fine. If I can't, then I flip over and find a different warm-up activity. Make a copy of the Unit 4 task sheet so I know that there's a Xeroxable here.
In the back of the book.
Legally a Xeroxable, I should add.
Ah.
Okay, so I make copies of those. I've got my warm-up activity.
Awesome.
And then I go into the lesson, and I tried to build in a lot of options. Again, if a teacher who wants the support, you've got the script there.
Right.
Other teachers don't. Something I would add, and this is related to the inner voice thing that I was talking about today, I think many of us as teachers are deathly afraid of silence. And we push the students into responding immediately.
Right.
You've got to come up with an instant answer. And well, that's really hard in your native language. And we're asking them to do this in a foreign language, which I think it defeats our purpose, because what happens when you have to respond instantly? You do whatever you can say instantly, which usually means it's at a pretty shallow level.
Sure. What's your hobby, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like music. But I like music. Everybody likes music.
Yeah. You end up giving facile answers that...
Exactly. 2 or 3 minutes to think through what you want to say. That's why it's interesting on the classroom cassette, or on the classroom CD rather, which is different than this one. This is the student CD. The problem is a CD only holds 80 minutes worth of stuff,
sure.
so we couldn't fit everything on. On the classroom CD, there are 3 tracks of background music,
Oh, awesome.
which you just put on because, as teachers, a lot of us don't like silence. It's like we feel the need to talk.
Right.
So you put on background music. It's think time. Yeah, which is also on all of the big speaking activities, the pair works and the ensembles, we put in a step called plan ahead,
Right.
which is basically slow down, think through. So just look at the picture. In your mind, describe the picture. So that means once I get to describing it with my partner, I'm just describing it for the second time. The
I've
first
already got some
time
ideas.
was mental, but the second time you do something, it's always smoother, it's always easier. So, and it's an incredibly simple idea. And I put it in firsthand. You can do it with any book that you're teaching.
Sure.
Think time.
This actually comes to a conversation that I don't know that you know that we've started on your forums yet. You had put in a language and culture question.
I
forum.
read the first one just before I left Japan.
And I responded to it. One of the things that I believe in my classroom is that teaching, for instance, American culture in the classroom to low-level English students ends up having the students learn 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're teaching them, like the example I use, about Mount Rushmore,
Mm-hmm.
then they not only have to grasp the English, but they have to get their mind around what Mount Rushmore is and why some guy went and carved the top of a mountain into 4 faces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways this is the same thing that you're saying here. You're getting them to both imagine a situation and try to do that translate that situation to English at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas if they pre-visualize,
They have time to think through. I divide it into, okay, we're talking about content and we're talking about form.
right?
And when we demand instant production, it's creating the content. Just think of what they want to say.
Right.
Figure out what they're talking about. And create the form, figure out how to say it at the same time. And that's extremely difficult.
Sure it is.
That's why, okay, we're doing it right now. 2 native speakers having a conversation. We're both doing false starts.
Yep.
You start a sentence and then go back and start. And we do that because we're trying to create content and form at the same time.
Right.
So it's very difficult for native speakers, and again, I think we lock learners into. I often use the example. What do you like, sports? Because that's what people can come up with instantly.
Yeah, what is your hobby? My hobby is sports. What is you like sports? Yes, I'm very familiar with that particular
been
problem.
there. Been there. And just having, and even, so somebody's into sports. Well, no, they're not into sports. They're into lacrosse, or they're into
Right. And
taekwondo, or whatever. But you need a minute to think through how you're going to say it.
and why you like it, and then you can actually put some more content in. Listen, Mark, I know you have 2 more presentations today, and I know you've got a busy schedule, and I know you're going to have to eat. I have one more question for you. I end up, I think, being at least a similar kind of teacher to you. I like the wild and crazy stuff. I like to keep my students not necessarily off balance, but interested and not necessarily sure of what's going to come next. I don't like them to fall into any kind of stupor. So I like to bring in a couple of different things every once in a while. And one of the things that I pulled off was this is the extension activities, the supplementary activities. Now the ones for Unit 4 weren't as different or as
I don't know, I like to use the word wild, but some of the ideas in there are pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, some of them. Let me give you an example from Unit 5.
Sure.
Unit 5 is giving directions.
Yeah.
And I start out the first activity, which is not that weird, but it's kind of fun. And actually, I did it in a university in Busan yesterday, where I took the students and imagined the students were sitting one in front of the other as if they were in a taxi. And the taxi driver is Busan's only foreign taxi driver who not only does not speak Korean, he or she also does not know Busan. So the student has to give directions from the school as if you were talking to the taxi driver, and go down that street to the bank and turn right. Okay. Now that's the conservative activity. It's great fun, but it's not that weird. One of the things I love doing when I get to directions is you have 100 won shops, right? Some, not.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like $1 shops,
Yeah,
or different,
for sure.
different. Anyway, cheap stuff stores, right?
Yeah.
And you can often buy blindfolds that are actually designed for like when you're traveling on airplanes.
Sure.
And so on.
The little cap thingies.
Yeah, and for, or I'm sorry, 1,000 won, right? For 1,000 won, it's cheap enough. You can buy 15 or 20 of them, 30 of them for your whole class,
Sure.
right? So what I do is I have a whole bunch of different color poker chips,
Right.
and students work in pairs, one member is blindfolded. The other part, and the poker chips are scattered all over the room. The partner gives directions, cannot touch, because we're giving directions. So like, okay, go 2 steps forward, be careful, turn right,
Yeah.
turn left. Now that's the kind of thing I could never put in a teacher's manual. Or no, I could put it in a teacher's manual. I could never put it in a student book, because it's too weird for a lot of.
And it takes a certain kind of teacher
Yeah,
to do that
yeah.
certain kind of exercise,
Right.
for sure.
Can I go back and?
Of
I may
course.
want to, but to pick up on one thing, when we started, you were saying, use the word entertaining class, and I know what you're talking about, but I would like to suggest that engaging is probably a more useful way to look at it. I want the students, I want the class to engage the students. And where I make the differentiation, and I guess I mentioned it because we both like things that are kind of different and
Right.
flashy, it's very, very easy for the teacher to become too important, for the teacher to become the entertainer.
Yes.
And I always try to keep in mind, okay, where's the language, where's the value for the students coming in, and I just find engagement as a very useful thing to think about.
And it stops with engagement, you have a connection between the class and the teacher. And with entertaining, you have a bunch of
A
students
show.
sitting back watching the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is definitely not what we're looking for.
And we want, everyone's, you see, we want them actually using English firsthand to use it.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay,
Mark.
thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.